Okay, we're almost live. We're almost live. We're live.
We're almost live.
We're now
Hey.
we're now live. Okay. Hello everybody, and welcome to our July Q&A. Again, we're trying to do this every month, and I'm welcoming Jonah today on the team as well as myself. And today we're just going to have some fun, answer some questions. And I'm going to say this up front. Anyone who's tuning in, I see there are 30 people here, 35 people here. You 35 people on YouTube, you have a job. When people start rolling in throughout the rest of this live stream and they say, "Why aren't you looking at the live stream comments on YouTube?" I need you all to step forward and remind them that we're answering questions on Patreon first, then the forum, and then we will go back and go through any live stream comments if we have time at the end. So, again, the hierarchy: Patreon, the forum, and then live stream comments. So if you leave your things, you guys can leave all your questions in live stream comments. We'll go back and look at them. So leaving that there up front. Again, if you want to join our Patreon, that's where you can ask questions and be prioritized for this Q&A. And also, if you want us to join our forum, that link is already in the description. You can go ahead and join the forum and ask any questions right now, and we'll get to those before the Q&A. And do you have anything else you want to say before we get started?
I don't think so.
Okay. The first question's from Michael on Patreon, and actually, I think it's a good one for you. I know you guys are no fans of LastPass. I've been using LastPass for about 5 years now, and I've gotten used to the interface. It just works for me. My question: what is wrong with LastPass? Is there any urgency to change services from a security perspective? Which I think is a good question because a lot of people don't fully understand the scope of LastPass's issues.
Sure. Yeah, it was a little while ago, so I tried to refresh my memory. LastPass has definitely had like a number of security, like actual security breaches. Like, there was the recent one, and then there was one before that. And I don't remember the specifics of them off the top of my head, but it's uh like a long pattern of poor security practices on LastPass's end, that leads up to these. So like the latest one was issues with like their password hashing algorithm for like the master password. So like it was set to like security defaults that were way weaker than industry standard, like almost unbelievably like lower quality. Um, and it's just little things like that that really add up with LastPass to present like a pretty big problem with using it. So yeah, it's just really hard to recommend, I think.
Right. It doesn't have a good track record because even before all of the recent stuff in the last couple of years, there were already some things that were being thrown at LastPass for them not doing things properly. And what
Hmm.
really sends it home for me is I haven't heard of many other password managers out there that straight up led to people's vaults or master passwords getting hacked. That happened with LastPass. And because of the
Yeah.
LastPass breach, that led to many other issues as well, especially their sorry, I'm mixing something up with. I was about to go in a direction, but that was an Authy issue. But either way, with LastPass, I still probably think. How do you feel about is LastPass still better than No Password Manager?
Um,
It's not even a comparison because I don't know why you would join LastPass over anything else. But if you're already in LastPass, is that better than No Password Manager? Do you think?
I mean, probably not, especially because the implication with no password manager is probably like reusing passwords or using weak passwords that you can remember and things like that. So, like, the threat for a lot of people is still going to be credential sharing much more so than like your password vault being hacked. But at the same time, like, pretty much in my mind, like high security products like password managers especially are kind of you can trust them once, and if that trust is broken, it's really hard to go back and trust them again. And LastPass has had at least two chances now with like high profile security incidents. So it's like it's just problematic behavior as a company from their end. It's I can't understand how I could tell people to use it,
Right.
right?
I'm in the same. I can't, in good faith, tell someone I recommend using LastPass. It is something that can keep you safe and secure. I'm on the same page. So that's what it comes down to. If you like it a lot, it's probably not the end of the world if you stick with it. But it also it could maybe take you like 10 minutes to switch over to something else.
Yeah,
like bit
and there's
loading.
so many free options, is what I would say. Like, there's no reason to switch other than not wanting to switch. But
Yeah,
like,
no reason not
there's
to
a lot of
switch.
free options that are also better because LastPass's free option is really crippled, in my opinion. Like, that you can only use it on either desktop or mobile, but not both, and stuff like that. So it doesn't even fulfill like basic password manager requirements for most people on their free plan.
Right. I agree. I agree. Next question is also from Michael, and it is regarding ad and tracker blocking. So he's played around with services like NextDNS and Control D and others. So pretty much like firewall-oriented blocking, things that you would run on a DNS-wide level. And now he's trying out AdGuard at the moment. And his question is, do you recommend AdGuard or similar apps in combination with DNS filtering, or is this overkill and unnecessary? Um, I'll probably start off this one and just say on my end, I use both mainly because, the best analogy I can think of is ad blocking. Your DNS filter can block a lot of ads. It can have ad blocking built in, but it won't be able to block all the ads. YouTube ads won't be blocked, for example, if you use a DNS filter because the DNS filter is limited to just domain name blocking, which is somewhat limited in scope. Whereas a web browser tool can actually go into individual elements on a web page and block things that couldn't be blocked via DNS. So I don't think it's overkill at all. I would personally use both. Is that what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, even you pretty much covered everything I was going to say, but the other thing is also using an ad blocker extension in your browser makes the experience better as well. Because, like with DNS level blocking, it doesn't really change the content of the page. You oftentimes have like big blocks of empty space where an ad was because it was blocked by DNS, but most ad blockers will like change the style of that page to hide those elements completely so you don't have big missing sections of a page. But
Right,
yeah,
right,
that's pretty much it.
right. I agree. And yeah, if you don't like AdGuard, you can even do things like combine uBlock and NextDNS. You can do Control D and AdGuard. There's tons of different combinations. So just play around and see what works for you. But I don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
overkill at all. And the final question on Patreon before we move over to the forum is from Victor. And fair warning in advance, this is something that I'm not a developer, so I'm not going to have probably that much to add to this question, unfortunately. I don't know if you're going to have anything to add, but he pretty much says, I know you like PWAs, but there are some legitimate reasons to not release an app as a PWA, even if it's feasible. And he says, what would you consider a cutoff for if an application should be available as a PWA? And he talks about how he's developing a FOSS application using a SQL database, and he can either have the situation where it's going to be available as a PWA on all platforms using poorly performing database operations. He can make it available in desktop browsers only as a PWA with performant operations due to browser capability differences, or he can just say screw it and remove web as it's causing the headache along with other feature differences. So the only reason you can think of to continue with number two, which is make it available on desktop browsers only as a PWA, is so that Chromebook people could still use the app. I think if it's a long, pretty much he's having
Yeah,
issues with his database, his SQL database, and he's asking if there's any kind of cutoff to where it's just not worth doing a progressive web app because of his specific development situation.
yeah. As I mean, this seems like a really specific question for like your particular application. As a non-developer myself, I don't really have any advice about like how to do that more performantly, or if it's even possible. I don't know if there are like more native databases that you could use when you're making a PWA that would perform better than an SQLite database. I don't know what your app is doing that it has to rewrite the entire database on every data change. That doesn't sound right to me, but again, I don't know. And if that is the case, um, I guess you'd have to evaluate that for yourself, like if the performance difference makes a lot of sense. Because there are a lot of benefits to making a PWA, right? And you pretty much instantly get cross-platform compatibility when you make it. So that's a huge like development benefit. But if it doesn't work for your app, then it kind of doesn't work for your app. And I guess without knowing the specifics of your app, I couldn't give you any advice one way or the other, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't have much to add here. This is definitely outside of my scope and my expertise for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Though I would say there's probably other projects you can reach out to that might be open source and they might be willing to like share some details about how they do things. So there might be better people to ask than ourselves on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just refresh the page, make sure there's no other posts here. Okay, we're good. Let me move on to the forum then. The forum, again, just for people who are new, hello. So we just went through our Patreon questions, which are prioritized. Now we're moving on to the forum. And then after that, we're going to go back, if we have any time, for the live stream comments on YouTube. So if you want to leave something, go ahead and join the forum. It's down in the description. And then we will get to your thing sooner. Do you want to start since I asked the last three?
Yeah, let me get it pulled up here.
You didn't have it pulled up
Some
already?
some some questions from Anon on the forum. I have it now. um, First question is, which one is less invasive from a mobile carrier data, device data collecting perspective? Like a data only plan, an eSIM, uh, a regular physical SIM card, or using a hotspot instead of a personal device? Um,
Do you want me to start or do you want to take that one? I can
do you
start.
have any thoughts on that? You can start.
The only thought I have is personally, I haven't seen any real difference between any of
Yeah,
them when it comes to like raw data collection that happens in order to provide the service. So the hotspot's going to send similar data to whatever cell company as the phone will. I guess there might be different technologies, like if you're using unencrypted like SMS, or if you're doing phone calls, then that now produces something new. But if you're just doing data only, I find it to be pretty similar. The only difference is the amount of personal information required to be linked to that data. So that's why a lot of people in the past and to this day still recommend Mint Mobile, because you can just go to a store, buy one, and just register with an email. And then they don't need to have your social security number. They don't need to KYC you. So you don't have to give them a lot of personal information just to register. That's personally what I look for. I haven't seen much else to change this. You normally have to rely on technologies like a VPN and things like that to prevent your data, the company that's providing you service from spying on your data. Is that
absolutely. I guess it kind of depends on what data you're worried about that carrier collecting. Like, is it the data about the traffic that you're sending, or is it data like connection data, like your location, which they can triangulate with like cell towers and stuff like that, um, which is more difficult to avoid because you have to physically connect to their network. Um, it's there is a benefit. I would like you mentioned hotspots. And that does provide like some layer of separation because you're not running any of the mobile carrier stuff on your phone directly. You're connecting to it through another device, which could be less trusted than your phone. Um, but there are drawbacks to that as well, especially with like Wi-Fi hotspots. If you have one of those, you're broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal every time you use it, and that could be easily tracked. There's a lot of people, organizations that track Wi-Fi networks around, probably even more commonly than like cell network tracking. So you could be putting yourself more at risk if you're using a Wi-Fi hotspot constantly. Um, I'm thinking like obviously Google Street View tracks Wi-Fi devices when they drive around the country. Even at my parents' house, they have a Unify router, and that router tracks like nearby um, access points. So if you went by my parents' house with a Wi-Fi hotspot, for example, that would be logged on their system. And there's a lot of systems that do that as well. Um, you're probably if it I mean in that case you're probably better off just using airplane mode no matter what device you use and like disabling your cell network whenever you're not using it because you can on most devices enable airplane mode and Wi-Fi at the same time, so you can disable like your cellular radios without retaining a data connection. But yeah, it's kind of tricky is what I would say with all that mobile carrier stuff.
right? It's a hard thing to avoid. There's just not
Hmm.
much to do against cell carrier tracking unless you really, 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 really wanted to go above and beyond with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, their next question is asking about Rivo alternative. I guess just to give some context for people listening, Rivo is an OTP application. It's an open source alternative to Google Authenticator, and they were recently acquired by a company with questionable motives and questionable privacy practices. Um, so I guess strictly speaking, let's not get too much into that right now. Just assuming someone doesn't like Rivo anymore, do you have any alternatives?
Yeah, I that was my favorite app on iOS. So off the top of my head, there's like other options. There's free OTP, I think it's called, from Red Hat, which is an open source option. I've seen a lot of people switching to 2FAs, which we haven't really looked into too much yet. But I've also seen some questionable privacy practices on 2FA's end as well. Like there's a big discussion on the Privacy Guides forum about uh, Rivo alternatives at the moment. So I've seen a lot of people posting like 2FAs is using different analytics from like Google and stuff like that, and they don't have good export from what I've heard. Again, I haven't really looked into it too much myself, but there's a lot of drawbacks with a lot of the options out there. So I don't know if you have any better suggestions.
I don't. I wasn't a fan of free OTP personally. I felt like it was
Yeah.
super buggy. There was tofu, but my issue is like I want something that tofu doesn't let you view your private seeds for your own keys. So that was
Hmm.
kind of off the table for me. So I don't know. Still exploring, I guess. I don't think
Yeah,
there's
it kind of
anything
caught me by surprise, the
right.
whole
I don't
acquisition thing.
right. I don't know why anyone would buy a 2FA app. Unless they plan to make it a paid app at some point, but I don't know what the business model would be.
I don't know. The writing on the wall for this was kind of there. We were talking about this a few months ago with like how they weren't fully open source, right? They have like some weird proprietary license, Rivo OTP does, where like you can't distribute compiled binary, so you can't fork it and make your own. And that's the kind of thing that leads to problems like this. That's why I like open source software so much. You can kind of avoid problems like this more easily because if this was an open source project, people would have just forked this. I mean, almost definitely,
Right. It's a
right?
good point. It's interesting. 2FAS and Arrivo look very similar.
Hmm.
I just thought that was interesting. I don't think they're actually forked from one another, but 2FAS, from what I've seen, looks extremely similar to Rivo.
I did notice that, but I've seen some like problems with the UX. Like some people were saying that it's difficult to export your secrets, which is maybe the same problem that Tofu had. So might not be a great option. I'm
Hmm.
not sure.
Um, let's try to limit like to two questions per person if people ask more than two. So why don't we go ahead and move on?
Sure.
Um,
Um,
oh, go ahead.
Ambrosio on the forum asks, do you have any tips on approaching job searching while keeping a reasonable level of privacy?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Don't we have a whole? It's been so long. You start to like
I was gonna
lose.
say, didn't you make a video about
I
this?
think we did. Let me. When you make so many videos, you start losing track of which one. But yeah, I'm like 99%. Yeah, we did. So I actually made a video a year ago that's called The Ultimate Guide to Private Job Hunting, which really dives into this. It really boils down to like really a lot of aliasing, compartmentalization, but it's very balanced. Like there's a lot of it that it's like, yeah, a lot of this might be overkill, so here's like the basics of what you should take care of. I definitely think if you're on a job hunting search, there is going to be a sacrifice on the privacy front, almost no matter what you do. Um, because at some point or another, you're looking for a job, and they're going to need your real information to pay you. And you can't just show up as Jim, like, hey, my name's Jim. Oh, well, actually, my name's not Jim. My name is actually Jerry. Yeah, I had a brain fart, and so, um, yeah, the job search is definitely going to require, I think, a little some privacy sacrifice. And if you want more specifics, I would point you towards the Techlore guide on that. Aside from the guide, was there anything in particular that you wanted to bring up?
No, I don't think so.
I will say Ambrosio put like a quick little like sample, and I really like specifically the mention of having like your domain registered. I think that having your own domain is both good for your privacy and it gives you a nice landing page where you control what information you're sharing, and
Hmm.
it looks more professional. Like it's a win even on the usability front as well when it comes to when I'm tying usability to like the success of your job hunt. So I definitely think that's a good way to go. And I would have a phone number, but I'd probably just set up like a my pseudo number if you have that option, or some kind of aliasing solution if you have that ability. Um, yeah, let me go back here to Amag. Amag? Amag? They say banks are basically a necessity in 2023 because Monero just doesn't cut it for daily spending. Are there any tips or techniques you use to minimize the amount of information banks and credit card companies collect about you? I've heard about credit freezes, but for many people that could impact your ability to get a loan or impact interest rates. Do you want to start?
Um, Something that I want to bring up is I think this is a common misconception
Mm-hmm.
with credit freezes. They don't really impact the data that they're collecting on you, first of all. So if your credit is frozen, all of these companies are still going to be adding things to your credit report. What the freeze does is more of it prevents other companies from reading that report without getting your permission. So it's more of a security um, effort on your part. The other thing is that credit freezes can be modified and removed via the website of all three of the big credit providers. So it's really easy if you are going to apply for a loan or a credit card or something like that to log into um, whichever uh, credit reporting company you need to unfreeze and just flick a switch. Some of them kind of make it difficult to find because they want you to like pay for some premium credit monitoring service. But
That one's the
all
worst
three of
one.
them do have this option online, and it's always free. So you pretty much should always freeze your credit whenever you can. And
Yeah, just to like put a pin
even
on that, not to interrupt, but like
yeah.
every American should freeze their credit. It should be the default. It
Hmm.
has no impact to you. It only protects you. I'll leave it there.
It really should. And like if you do apply for a loan and your credit is frozen or a credit card, you'll usually just get a notice that says, "Hey, your credit is frozen. Unfreeze it, give us a call, and then we'll redo your application." So there's really like no downside except for the very minor inconvenience of having to log in and flick a switch to unfreeze your credit. So first of all, definitely do it. Secondly, to answer like your main question, uh, if you use like cards a lot, a virtual card service like privacy.com, especially with like the masked merchant option, can hide that information from like your bank and stuff like that. Um, Financial privacy is pretty tricky though. Like the biggest thing you can do in a lot of cases is try to avoid using credit cards, debit cards, like any kind of digital banking as much as possible in favor of like cash, for example, but it's not always super easy to do. So kind of a tricky problem to solve.
Right. I think that's all good stuff. I'm definitely on this very similar page. Like cash is definitely king in a lot of
Hmm.
situations, but that's slowly becoming harder and harder to do. Online is actually, for me, easier than in person. Because online, I just use privacy.com cards, and then my bank doesn't know anything that I spend. And I
Yep.
trust privacy.com's ability to keep my transactions private more than my bank would. And even if they didn't, I'm not in a worse spot than I would have been if I just used my bank card. And it comes with the benefit of all these companies I use my credit card online for won't be able to correlate that it's the same person. I'm also not jeopardizing my actual banking information every time I shop online. So it's also a security perk. So for me, privacy.com has just become completely indispensable for my privacy and security journey. And even if it failed me, I would be like no worse off than I would have been without it. So for me, it's like one of those tools that's just such a staple. But
Hmm.
um, if you are forced to use anything that involves your debit and credit card outside of going through the basic opt-outs, I will say a lot of your banks actually do have opt-outs that are very well hidden. A lot of mine, I had to call them. Like there's a very specific number they have you call, and you have to ask them to opt out. It helps being in California. I have a few more rights in California that I can utilize against some of these companies. So I would just say that, like, go and see what the hidden privacy opt outs are within your bank. I don't think it's going to prevent much but it'll at least help. You're not going to be worse off if you do those things. But otherwise, just try to keep the transactions away from your bank altogether, whether through something like privacy.com or cash, like Jonah said.
Mm-hmm.
Did I ask the last one? I did.
Yeah, I'll ask this one. Backfield3779 on the forum is asking a question about your recent "Why Browser Wars Are Silly" video. You argued that there's many reasons that people could choose to use a particular browser, and people should stop thinking they should only use a single browser. But you didn't discuss any of the problems that the Chromium monopoly might have. And he has an argument about like why the Chromium monopoly matters, but I'm wondering if you gave that any consideration when you were making that video.
A little bit. So actually, I mean, first off, it's definitely out of scope for this video, I feel. This video, like the main purpose of the video, I mean, it's literally called "Why Browser Wars Are Silly. Here's what matters." And the whole purpose of the video is to speak to the different use cases of every browser and how every browser has pros and cons for the individual end user. So in this case, like just for the individual, just thinking about the individual, there are benefits to, for a lot of people, there's benefits to certain Chromium browsers, and there's also drawbacks to certain Chromium browsers. Talking about the Chromium monopoly issue, I think, is a different video that I could make, but it would have had to take up like a whole. I want to give it its own proper discussion, is probably like the best way to put it. But also, even within the video, I did kind of mention, if you pause, one of the pros that I put, I think, for the Firefox section, because the video starts with me saying I used to use just Firefox and Tor. One of the pros was, I think it was avoiding Chromium. So like it's still like a consideration. It's something I do think about, but it's not something that I'm going to, like, for people who watch the video, you know that I tried every browser to see what worked for me in my workflow. I'm not going to like greatly inconvenience myself just for this purpose, because at the end of the day, Chromium is actually not. I'm curious for your thoughts on this. While I don't want Google to control the entire web via Chromium, Chromium is open source, and also I do overall like the Chromium browser engine. It has really good support for things, and a lot of people say it's because it's just popular, but also there are some valid technological improvements found in Chromium that Firefox is still catching up on as well. A lot of people who develop web applications constantly talk about how behind Firefox is in this realm. So there's valid improvements to Chromium as well, which I think does impact the end user. Whether or not you want to use Chromium, I think comes down to an ethical question. And that's not something I can answer for people. Personally, I like to always have a non-Chromium browser on my system, but I'm not going to deal with the inconveniences of dealing with non-Chromium browser engines for my use case at the moment. I don't know if there's anything you have to add there. I mean, this is a very hot topic, so I don't expect this to be something that like everyone's going to take super well.
It's a really tricky topic for sure. I was just looking at
before I sorry one sorry I don't want to, but like the last thing I want to say, I think the manifest v3 stuff is totally overblown. Like people are freaking out over that. There's valid reasons for it from a security perspective, and everyone's like, it's going to kill ad blockers. There's already a working uBlock origin like alternative that works on manifest v3. So things like that I just don't personally see as a huge deal, but that doesn't mean that I don't have other concerns. I do have concerns, but I think it's a little overhyped. But sorry, now I'll leave it off. I just wanted to address that.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into the latest on Manifest v3 because it feels like kind of a threat that's been looming forever and nothing has ever come of it, and they keep extending it and whatever. So it's like it just hasn't been present in my mind as a realistic threat.
It's also not a requirement. Brave said they're not going to do it. So this isn't something that's directly tied that needs to happen within Chromium, which I think is another misconception. Like other browsers can change things in Chromium and still be Chromium based.
That is a big thing for sure. Like Brave and even Microsoft Edge like make a lot of difference from Chromium and Google Chrome that like significantly impact how the browser works. So it's not like you're locked into using Google Chrome just because the underlying engine is Chromium. At the same time, I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on it because I'm looking into like the web environment integrity API that Google just proposed in Chrome, for example. And they've already like built a beta of it into the latest Chromium builds. And stuff like that is the kind of stuff where really like all of these web standards should be developed by like an independent organization with a lot of different stakeholders, and Google is just kind of forging ahead with their own thing, and they do this a lot with new Chromium features, and those features just become the de facto standard on the web, whether other browsers like it or not. And I think that it does push through a lot of things that aren't necessarily great for users. So it's just a tricky problem. Browsers are like so complex that it's very difficult to build an alternative. That's the main reason that Chromium is as big as it is, because everyone has standardized on it now, for better or for worse, and now it's really hard to switch.
Right.
And I don't know if there's much to do about that, really.
Right. I'm with you. I really agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think that you better articulated some of my still continual wariness towards Chromium.
Hmm.
But I'm also not going to just completely not use a browser just for the sole reason of it being based on Chromium, personally. But I understand why people don't, kind of. Um,
Yeah,
like, I get it. I totally get the reasoning. But also, yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Gecko, honestly. Um, and I not happy. Like I wish I liked it. Like I always like try to use it and try to get like into it, but just so many things that I use are either slower or just not as compatible, or they work differently on Gecko-based browsers, and that for me is frustrating when I'm just trying to
that is
work.
really interesting. Just because I haven't really personally experienced that with the stuff that I use, which
Yeah,
kind of means that it comes down to a what you use your browser for type of deal, I think.
right.
But now that I am using like PWAs more, stuff like that is definitely a drawback of Firefox.
Huge
And
drawback.
a lot a lot of the drawbacks with Firefox, this kind of annoys me a lot. They seem to be mostly conscious decisions on Mozilla's end to not implement a feature, rather than like them just being behind on development. Like
Right.
PWAs, for example, are just a thing that they don't want to build. It's not like they want to and it hasn't been done yet, right?
Right.
So
They actively got rid
kind of
of it.
annoys me. Right.
Right. I don't know. I'll summarize that by saying I'm not pro Chromium. I'm not also against Chromium on my end. I see kind of the arguments on both ends, and it is a factor in my decision making process, but I'm not going to just pick a browser based on whether or not it's based on any particular engine. I'm rather going to
Hmm.
look at the use case that each browser provides me. And for me, the engine is just going to factor into the use case debate for myself.
Absolutely.
Next question is from Valeria, which is actually they were curious about the same thing with Chromium, so hopefully that helps. And then they have a new question. A question I have is, why do you think that IRC isn't suggested much as a private messaging alternative? It is because of its age or how it's different from the current instant messaging protocols? This is a good one. I think you'll like this one.
Um, well, I can answer that.
Yeah.
I, both of those things are definitely true. IRC was definitely built for like a different era, probably one where most people just have one computer and they can log into it, um, as is, because IRC doesn't have modern messaging features like messaging sync between devices and stuff like that. It also doesn't make a lot of sense in the spaces that we're in because it doesn't really have any end-to-end encryption at all, as opposed to modern messengers like Element or Signal. So it's I really like IRC, like personally, and I have like an IRC messaging system set up because there are some channels on IRC that I follow, but it's not really it's pretty obvious when you use it why it was replaced by Matrix by most open source projects and by other messengers like Signal and WhatsApp and whatever for like one-on-one messaging, because IRC just um, it's just a very basic protocol and people expect a lot of different features from messaging clients that IRC doesn't really provide.
I've like never used IRC.
Really,
No, not really.
that's kind of surprising to
Yeah,
me.
I know, me too. I just had that realization of like I've read about it and I kind of understand it broadly, but I've never actually used it. So
Hmm.
interesting. I guess I just never had a channel or a reason to like use it. because I always just use messages for private messaging, which I wouldn't use IRC for obvious reasons. And then I never had like a channel or a group to join on IRC.
Yeah, there are a lot of like benefits to IRC for public channels, and it is still pretty popular among like open source communities. Although again, a lot of them are switching to Matrix now. But like just the simplicity of it makes it super easy to pop in, ask a question. You can even like embed an IRC client in your browser in on like your website, for example, and
Oh, that's
people could
pretty
just
cool.
ask a question there, do stuff like that. You don't need an account or anything. Or you can make an account on the fly without saving like authentication or anything. So it's cool as like a neat piece of technology, but it's not really practical for most messaging applications.
Right.
That's what I think.
That's pretty cool. That's all I have on that.
Um, Next question on the forum, EcoGeek asks, what browser or browsers do you use on mobile?
Okay, yeah. So I've been um, constantly cycling on the mobile browser front.
Oh yeah.
And just because, okay, I'm going to start this by saying I am not happy with mobile browsers. I'm just not. I can't like find a single browser that I'm like, this is the one. I'm really happy with it, or even like two or three. I'm like, okay, here's the perfect browser workflow I finally found, and I'm confident in it. And when I talk to people, this is what I'm going to tell them. So I don't have a confident answer here.
Yeah.
On the Android front, I really like Brave. Brave does a lot of good things on Android. I'm a huge fan. I really used to like Bromite before it just fell off the face of the earth, though there is a new fork that is coming about that I'm excited to see what they do. It's not based on
Mm-hmm.
Chromium at the moment. So I guess we'll see what they do with that. I don't know. I'm curious. Um, and I really, really like Mole as well on Android. My only concern with Mole is that it seems to, as far as I know, be maintained by a pretty small team, possibly just one person actually. So that's the one thing that I don't like about Mole. So I do like Brave to kind of have like a more dependable browser that's always accessible, that's always getting updates, that's Chromium based, and they do a lot of good things there. But again, I'm just not super happy with anything. I'm not like, oh, I'm such a huge fan of this one browser on Android. And then on iOS, I actually really liked Brave on iOS, to be honest. I do like it, but it's a lot more limited. My dog doesn't like iOS browsers either. So,
Apparently, yeah.
um, but regarding, is he done?
Is there something going on over there?
Someone must have knocked, and he's just going ape shit. But with the iOS front, I really liked Brave. Firefox Focus is nice for just an expendable, ephemeral browser. But also, I don't mind the Safari and AdGuard configuration, which I know is probably what you're going to suggest. Hey, quiet. No. All right.
Yeah. For me, it's mostly see, I don't really use my mobile browser for a lot of stuff. It's really just like quick browsing. So Safari, because I use an iPhone, works very well for me. When I use an Android phone, I use Brave, just because it seems to be just a solid option all around. But I haven't really put a lot of thought into mobile browsers because they don't really fit into my workflow too much outside of like Googling the answer to the various questions. Um, so yeah, in any case, pretty much Safari with AdGuard is what I use, and that's pretty much it.
All right. Mic unmuted. That's because yeah, I'm just so unhappy with the mobile space, to be honest. And I don't
Yeah,
think it's like the developers or development's fault, especially on iOS, right? Like on iOS, pretty much everything has to be WebKit based, and it's pretty limited in what they can do. So all they can provide is some limited features on top of what Safari with something like AdGuard would provide. But on Android, I don't think there is a fantastic excuse, maybe, that I've seen. So I just would like to see a better browser on Brave or on Android.
on Android, yeah. Mobile browsers kind of undercooked in general. I do
Right.
have to say about the WebKit thing, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I I think they are. I don't know if did they confirm multiple engines. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
they
officially
did. It's
confirmed
official.
or
It's gonna
okay.
happen.
I kind of have mixed feelings about that just because the the obvious outcome here this ties to the Chromium monopoly. When this happens, pretty much everyone on iOS is going to switch to Chrome. And WebKit currently is like the only it's the main competitor to Chrome right now because Gecko isn't super popular these days. So we're losing like a major player in this space because I really don't see a lot of people sticking with Safari when because most people use Chrome already. Chrome is going to provide a lot of extra features on iOS that people are gonna use. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good
It's
point.
it's just kind of a shame.
It is. Well, I'm mixed on the WebKit thing as well. And my reasoning for being mixed on it is from a privacy and security perspective because, and this is actually something that Arthur Edelstein, the developer of Privacy Tests, mentioned in the interview that I did with
Mhm.
him. He's like, if you look at the chart in privacytest.org for iOS browsers, it's like overall like probably one of the best performing on average uh, sections on the website because
Mhm.
if you look at the desktop browsers, it's completely different, and lots of browsers don't even have basic privacy and security features. Whereas on iOS, there's actually a very good staple bare minimum. And that's because everything's based on WebKit, and a lot of these privacy and security features are already baked into WebKit. So even if you put out like a sketchy, awful browser on iOS, it's still actually going to have some more protections than even some other browsers on desktop. Um, and so like it's gonna kind of suck to lose that bottom limit. But what I'm hoping happens is if someone's gonna build a crappy browser, they're probably still gonna have the option to still be WebKit based. And so I hope that browsers can still utilize WebKit and still take advantage of WebKit's power. And if they're going to do better than that, then they have the ability to do better than that. So I hope that's the situation that we see. So some people like Brave or Firefox or any of these browsers can go above and beyond what Apple allows them to do, but hopefully that bare minimum is still there. Is what I want to see. Are you looking at the site?
Yeah, I was I was trying to find out if there were stats about like browser market share on macOS specifically, because I kind of wonder how many people on macOS use Safari versus Chrome, but I couldn't find that
That'd be
stat
interesting.
easily.
That'd be
Yeah,
interesting. I bet it's pretty 50-50. I feel like a lot of people just use
you
the
think so?
default Safari, but I feel like a lot of people will just download Chrome because they're used to downloading Chrome. Did you think it was more or less?
I suspect that probably Chromium has an edge. I think Safari is probably significant, but maybe like 30% in my mind or something like that.
Interesting. I haven't
But I don't know.
noticed that. Of all the people I know, there's a few of them who are like edgy and download Chrome on like their Apple devices, but the people that I know who use Apple devices who are just normies, they all just use Safari. Cuz like why it's like so annoying to like not use Safari on at least iOS right now. Cuz
Well,
like
it's not well on iOS. Yeah, I was
yeah,
thinking about
Mac
macOS
OS it's
just because of
different.
the
Like Mac
engine
OS is
difference.
fine, but like on iOS like literally so many features are kind of annoying to use if you don't use Safari.
Yeah.
So, oh, that was a long-winded. That's a good Techlore clips question.
Yeah. I'll
um,
have to look for that. If anyone has stats like browser market share on macOS, post it on the forum or something for me to see.
it's. I just quickly peeped at the chat, and someone said Henry is a door-to-door VPN salesperson knocking on his door. Thought that was pretty funny. Okay, did I? It's my turn to ask the question, right?
Sure.
Do you use an RSS system? If so, what reader, server, or client do you use?
I
By GabG.
I do not use RSS.
You,
Kind of
you don't use
surprisingly.
RSS?
I know.
You're a
It's
nightmare.
crazy.
Whoa. How do you like keep up
I
with things?
I don't usually.
Oh, wow.
And that works for me. I don't need like a constant feed of information, honestly,
That's why you use
like being
RSS
presented
though.
to me at any time. But that's still like a central feed that I have to look through and keep track of. I don't want any information to come to me. Usually, if I have to know about something, people will tell me.
Interesting. But the reason it's funny because the reasoning for you not using RSS is why I use RSS. Because otherwise, like if I want to find like I can always just find something, but my RSS client is limited to like YouTube channel subscriptions, so I don't have to open
Hmm.
YouTube and be bombarded with suggestions and be fed tons of crap. I just get like my channel subscriptions and my RSS client, and then I just follow like a generic tech thing just to get like the biggest news. Slashdot's what I follow, and it just gives me like 10 to 15 articles a day. At night, I'll just quickly skim through it. If I see anything interesting, I'll read it, but then I'll normally check all my news within like a few minutes each day. That's why I use RSS.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
just don't do that either. Like the only sites that I regularly check are probably the Techlore forum and the Privacy Guides forum, and my GitHub notifications. And other than that,
Huh.
I'll see things when people tell me about them, or if they're posted on the forum, I'll see that news. But I don't like I don't really seek out a lot of information. And like if I go on YouTube or something, for example, I'm always searching for a specific creator or video to watch, and not like looking through a feed of my subscriptions or anything like that. So
Interesting. Very interesting. Um,
yeah.
on my end, I have a few devices. I really liked Feeder on Android. It's available on F-Droid. It's pretty solid, really good UI and everything. And then on iOS, NetNewsWire was really nice as well. So those are my
I've
two
heard a lot
favorites.
of good things about NetNewsWire. I think it's also on macOS, isn't it?
It is, and if you do
Yeah.
macOS plus iOS, it syncs via iCloud. So, which is awesome because for those who don't know, in the iOS macOS ecosystem, you can pretty much just not have to have an account, and it'll still sync via your iCloud. And now that you have the end-to-end encrypted option in iCloud, that's now end-to-end encrypted as well. So you have an end-to-end encrypted sync for your RSS client between your Apple devices, which is really neat. So
Hmm.
something to throw your way. Not like I don't know, I don't update my RSS clients very much, so it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter. It's not like I add new things or remove feeds on a day-to-day basis, so it doesn't really matter. I can just export my feeds on like an Android device and import it into another device, but still it's like one less thing to think about if you're going to go that route.
Hmm. Uh, Go on to the next form question. Spectator asks, they're considering buying a new Windows PC for personal use, and they're wondering if using Linux on a virtual machine is more or less private than using Linux on like a live USB stick. And they don't want to dual boot for whatever reason. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't I can't think of any particular. Well, I would definitely say that using it on a live USB stick is definitely going to be more secure, mainly because
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different operating system running on its own end of things. My concern would be if you're using a virtual machine. There have been, it's extremely hard, extremely rare, not something most people have to worry about, but there have been instances where something could escape the virtual machine back onto the host. So there is still a risk of infecting the host OS, but also that's somewhat possible as well on a live USB stick, depending on how what your configuration is like. Because correct me if I'm wrong, even with a live USB stick, if you have like an unencrypted Windows installation, you can still view and access all your window files from a live USB stick. And if that's the
Right.
case, theoretically, like that USB stick actually probably has more access to your normal system than a virtual machine would possibly. So
Although I will say that should not be the case. You should encrypt
yes,
your Windows install.
right. Encrypt your hard
Just
drives,
saying.
people.
Hmm.
That's a pretty big
Um,
thing that you should do.
yeah. I would almost be more concerned about kind of the reverse. Like if you're using a Windows host OS and a Linux virtual machine, both as like daily drivers, you really have to be more worried about the Windows outer host OS infecting the VM, because that OS does have a lot of access into the VM, whereas the other way around is not super likely, as you said. Um, and so from that perspective, you kind of do have to worry about anything you have installed on the Windows side of things if you're using a Linux VM, because if you have like malware in Windows or like a keylogger or something, that is going to capture everything in that Linux VM. Um, so from that perspective, um, using a live USB stick is pretty much the same as dual booting, and I would suggest both dual booting or a live USB stick in most cases. Alternatively, I mean, this is why I like um, operating systems like cubes, where you don't really have an outer host OS where you're running everything. Everything is in VMs and they're separated from each other. But stuff like cubes has drawbacks as well, especially for like video acceleration. You can't really game in the VM super well. So it's a lot of trade-offs
Right.
and stuff to keep in mind when you're doing it.
A lot of good points you made there. A lot of good stuff. Um, yeah, I will say for me, they're also just very different use cases. Like I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, you make it sound like is using Linux, like what are you using Linux for? Because if you're going
Yeah,
to use it as a virtual machine, it sounds like you might need something a little more permanent. Doesn't need to be, but are you going to reinstall Linux every time? I guess you could set up a live, right? You can set up a live Linux virtual machine that like every time you
you
shut it
could.
down. But again, it's different use cases as well. With a live USB stick, you could set up persistence, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I would also think of the use case between the two of them and see what works better for you also, aside from the privacy side of things. Oh, it's my turn. Dimitri. Okay, he has some questions. I use Molvad browser. I want to block specific elements on a web page like YouTube recommendations using uBlock Origin. Will it impact my fingerprint and make me more unique? That's a good question. I'm not actually familiar on that one.
Um, so any modifications to a website could be detected by that website, basically. So if you change from the defaults, if you change any of the settings in Molvat browser from the defaults, including like your filters in uBlock Origin, that is going to affect your fingerprint. Um, so like if you did it on YouTube, for example, YouTube, if they track that, would probably be able to follow your specific Molvat browser install around. But at the same time, if you do like a per site filter like that, it's not going to impact your fingerprint on other sites. So like anywhere outside of YouTube isn't going to be impacted. So that's just kind of a risk you have to balance. It shouldn't be a big deal like overall, but it stuff like that can definitely be detected by the site that you're modifying.
Right.
You have anything to add about uBlock?
No, not on my end. I haven't looked into how specific filters from like or configuring certain extensions in different ways can impact fingerprinting, so I don't have anything to add there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second
I know we're only doing two. Is there one that you'd rather answer?
we already talked about Rivo, so I'll cover Skiff.
Oh yeah.
Um, Here I'll just take. So Dimitri asked, with the recent listing of Skiff on privacy guides, are you willing to? I didn't know you guys listed them. Are you willing to review the service in an upcoming video? Just recommend it. Yeah. So the Skiff, it's been on my like back burner. There's a ton of things I need to review. The reviews take so long, but it's been on the back burner for a while now. The problem with Skiff, everyone's asking for it. I'm just gonna be frank. Skiff Mail, I haven't done much testing with yet. Actually, barely at all. So I need to first use it myself. But regarding the rest of the Skiff suite, I did use, and if I was gonna do a review, everyone already complains that I'm so critical in my reviews, and if I publish that review, it would be like everyone would like hate it. Like it's just it puts me in a tough spot because like I don't care if people hate it. Like it's my review. And like if people
Yeah.
hate the review, then that sucks. But also like then if I know I'm just going to put out a review and it's not going to like I don't know. We used Skiff for a long time and we had a lot of issues with it and I still am like there's no audits for it. Nothing's open source outside of the mail. So I guess all my complaints lie with everything outside Skiff Mail. And if I was going to do a review, I probably wouldn't review just Skiff Mail. I would review the whole suite. So that's kind of been the conundrum back here and why it's been kind of on and off over here, depending. Like, I just haven't prioritized this yet and figured out how to deal with it, is probably the best way to put it. But
Mm-hmm.
I probably should soon. That's something I need to take care of. Next one. Two of the next one.
uh, let's see. Mohammed on the forum asked what your favorite Fediverse platform is.
Um, Pixel Fed.
Really
Yeah, it's
interesting.
it like doesn't feel federated, which is why I like it. Like I because like here, okay, in my perfect world, things can be federated and not feel federated. And as much as I dislike Matrix, Matrix is a good example of it. Like you just type in someone's handle. You don't even have to like pay attention to what comes after the at on Matrix. You just message them and you can't even tell it's federated. That is
Hmm.
something I enjoy. Mastodon, I can tell every day that it's federated because like everything just doesn't work properly. Like likes don't show up on different things. It's a freaking mess. I can't stand it. But on PixelFed, it's beautiful. Like on PixelFed, it looks great. It's a great interface. It has great features. I love the development, and it doesn't feel federated, which for me is a win. It's federated
Hmm.
without being federated, is how I look at it. How about you?
I can't say I see Mastodon the same way. So I really like Mastodon a lot. And something to keep in mind is I run a lot of federated services. I have a Mastodon instance and a PixelFed instance and now a Lemmy instance, which I kind of do enjoy as like a Reddit alternative, but at the same time Reddit is kind of an annoying platform in itself, so a federated version of it is kind of inherently not my favorite, but it's fine. But I'd have to say that Mastodon is it just works the best for me. And I have a lot of issues with PixelFed more on the technical side than on the user side. Like, um, it's just kind of a ridiculous application. I don't like any PHP based applications, so like they all just kind of run weird and are difficult to install. Um, and from like an admin perspective, Mastodon has by far the best moderation tooling out of any of these platforms. So it's super easy on Mastodon to keep like your instance clean of trolls and stuff like that compared to pretty much all of the other services that I've found. Um,
Interesting.
so it's to me it's less of a usability thing and more of like Mastodon is just clearly much more mature in a lot of areas than all of the other alternatives right now. So that's why I like it. Um, PureTube is another one, and I actually like that a lot too. Um,
Oh.
especially the latest release, it works well. But
It's cool to get the administrative perspective of this though, because
mhm.
I don't host any of this stuff myself, but you do. That's really cool. I'm from a usability and user perspective, I'm not a fan of PeerTube. Though I gotta say, like over half of my issues with
Really
Mastodon are the clients. I the only
interesting.
client I've really enjoyed for Mastodon was Elk. That's it. Like all the other clients, I'm just using it and I'm like, oh, this is painful. I really like Elk. Have you tried Elk?
I have not,
You gotta try Elk.
but I guess I should. But I don't have an issue with the regular Mastodon clients like you do, so
Try
I don't
Elk,
know.
and then you'll have an issue with the other ones.
Okay. That's why I don't want to try it. I want to just stick with with what I
Ignorance
know.
is bliss, man.
Yeah, maybe. I'm interested in your issues with PeerTube, but I don't know if that's a big discussion or not.
Can I just like show you a screenshot of the PeerTube UI? Is that enough? Like, but like
I don't know. I don't have an issue with it
it's
personally.
mainly the creator tools. Like, there's so many things. Like, I had to make a playlist for Go Incognito. So for those, I finally updated Go Incognito to like live in a single playlist on PeerTube. So if you go to our website and go to Go Incognito, you can just click PeerTube, and now you have a whole nice playlist just like on YouTube. It's great. To do this, you couldn't like go into the playlist and click add videos and just like select all the
Mm,
videos. You couldn't even go to your videos panel and like add something to it. You can only add things to a playlist from the channel page. So you have to go to your channel page and scroll through all your videos and then add it to a playlist. It's little things like that on PeerTube that bug the living hell out of me. Like
interesting. Huh.
it's mostly the creator administrative side of things, like managing content. I think if I was to watch content, it'd be fine. But like actually uploading content and managing content and actually doing anything that's not just YouTube auto sync is where I start like really getting annoyed with PeerTube
Hmm.
personally. But it's also fine. Like I'm nitpicky, but it's fine.
Interesting.
And here I'll just take the second one here. Mohammed asks, why do you recommend Pop! OS and Linux Mint, etc. to beginners, even if they're not listed on both privacy guides and Techlore resources? Um, I've never just blatantly recommended Pop! OS Linux Mint. I think there's been a couple threads that you're referring to on our forum where someone asks what are some beginner-friendly distros, and I listed out like 4 or 5 of them, and I mentioned a lot of people like Pop! OS and Linux Mint because they're beginner-friendly distros. Just
Mm-hmm.
because something's not listed, like you can read the criteria. Privacy Guides has their own criteria and their own process of listing things, and then on the Techlore front, there's also criteria on our page, and those are held to different standards of something else. Like if I'm on here and I'm talking about how I don't like using, let's make something up. Let's say I hate Molvad browser. Theoretically, I can be like, I hate Molvad browser because it's terrible at doing this, it's terrible at doing that. PeerTube's terrible for doing this, but we still host content on PeerTube.
Mm-hmm.
So like the formal recommendations, the things that we use, like we have our own personal opinions on things, but we still try to have public criteria that are separate from that so people can follow something that's not just our personal opinions. Plus, personal opinions can live alongside formal recommendations, I feel. I think it's possible.
It there's definitely a difference between like a recommendation that you can make to anybody and a recommendation that you can make to one person on the forum for their specific use case. Like
Exactly.
if one person is asking something and maybe Pop! OS or Linux Mint makes sense for them, then we might recommend that. But that doesn't mean that it's gonna be like a solution that fits for everybody. Whereas like the recommendations on Techlore resources, the recommendations on sites like Privacy Guides are more for like pretty much most use cases you can get away with using these recommendations. And then anything other than those recommendations, like it's not that other things aren't recommended, but you just have to, it has to fit like your specific use case, right? And Pop! OS and Linux Mint aren't like super great for everybody. They're just maybe better in some cases than others.
Right. Good way of putting it. Another way that I like to think about it is the way I like to think about our resources, aside from our criteria, is like if a friend asks me, like, oh, like, what do I use to be more private and secure? I just send them that website. And it doesn't matter who the
Mm-hmm.
friend is, or the family member, or the stranger, or what language they speak. Like, if I send it to them, they will get information, and that's at least the Techlore resources page. So they're going to have like Techlore guides at the top that explains threat modeling and explains different things, and there's just tons of options and things for them to have fun with and figure out like what to check out, and hopefully they can trust, and hopefully that I can like maintain the trust of the community that anything you click on that website is something that's good and trusted. So um,
Yeah.
that's probably how I would look at the resources. They're not end all be alls.
Probably can move on to the next one. Internet Ghost on the forum asks, what's a common blind spot that people who are into privacy often have?
Ooh, one of the questions that I wish I like got to think about and looked at before recording.
Mm.
Streaming, that's the word, streaming. Um that's a good question.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, I guess on my end, I would say like not being able to differentiate between like a project and a company. And the reason why I call that a blind spot is because, and again, like I'm using project and company like very loosely here because you can be a like what I consider a project that's still incorporated.
Hmm.
And to some extent, like Techlore is kind of a project. Like if I disappear, the it just goes away for the most part. And if I'm trying to select software that I'm planning to use for the next 5 years, I need to factor that into my consideration. I think it's really easy for people to find something that hits all their checklist things that they're looking for, but it's brand new. It's only been developed for a couple of months. It has no business model. It's just being developed by someone in their free time. And then they move over to this, they dedicate everything to it, and then in 6 months, it shuts down. This happens all the time in the privacy world. There's tons of these little projects that spring up everywhere, and then they just don't exist in 6 months. And so I'd say that's actually probably the biggest blind spot for me. It's not actually like a, you know, this is where people are going to lose all their privacy and security gotcha blind spot. It's more of a when you're moving to privacy and security tools, think about the long term sustainability of what you're choosing. And if you're fine with something only lasting another 6 months because it's that good, then great. Just like keep it in the back of your mind because it happens a lot. Even for services that seem more established, like C Templar, who just disappear off the face of the earth and you're never going to get your emails back.
Hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a little difficult because, like, as somebody into privacy, it's very possible that I have some of these blind spots and maybe I'm not aware of them. but but there are things that I see a lot that are very difficult to explain to people. Like the biggest thing that I'm thinking of is like just the concept that there isn't a one size fits all solution to privacy. And when you kind of say it like that, it seems like that should be obvious, but a lot of people want um, like these tools to work for every single person on Earth. And like if we could just have one solution and tell everyone to use it, that would be great. But in reality, there's a lot of different like situations that people are in where different tools are going to make the most sense for them, and it might not match like your personal privacy experience. Everybody who is trying to improve their privacy and their personal security um, is going to take a different path, and it might not match yours. And I think that a lot of people who go down this privacy journey only see that all of the decisions that they made to get to where they are, and they are kind of blind to all of the decisions that could have been made that would lead them to choose different tools that a lot of other people are choosing to use. Like it's just it's there's no perfect solution for everybody, and it's the reason why like the Techlore resources page has so many different solutions in all these different categories and stuff like that. It's because things work better or worse for different people. um, and it just feels like a lot of people don't want to accept that their solution is not the only solution, right?
Right. And that's why like you can't like the Tecla resources, like at any point in time in the desktop browsers category, there might be 5 listed browsers. I might just be using 2 of them. Just because I'm not
Right.
using the other 3 doesn't mean they're not suggestions that I think that some people could utilize and benefit from. But even on like my front, even though it's my website, I'm not using every little thing on the website. Like I'm selecting what works best for me at any given time. So yeah, I really wish that more people like kind of got that in their heads that like you're right, like there is no perfect solution for everybody. That was kind of the whole reason I made that browser video recently. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, hey, because a lot of people don't. And this is kind of the other maybe this is quite literally a blind spot. A lot of people enter privacy and they're blind to what will happen in the next couple years. They don't see what the journey looks like. And so I think that is a lot of people's idea. There is very much a, okay, I just learned about privacy and now I want to be private. What do I download to be private? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
just obviously something you download and it's a toggle. It's a lot more nuanced and complicated than that, but people think it's just a, oh, I didn't know Chrome was not private, so what do I use to be private? And I think those videos are super important where I share my journey and I share what it really looks like. Here's what it looks like. It's you try something out, you realize it's too extreme. Maybe it's perfect for you and you got lucky on the first time. Maybe you find out it's not extreme enough and it doesn't actually have as many protections as you wanted. And so you're just making adjustments, you're modifying your workflow over the course of years, you're switching browsers, you're switching things, and you're seeing how it interacts with the rest of your life because your whole life doesn't need to revolve around privacy and security. You're trying to just slowly fit this in and make progress there. It's like your health. Like, are you eating the same thing that you've been eating every day for the last 3 years? No, like your health evolves. Like your understanding of your health evolves. What you do in your life, your exercise program, the food you eat, like it's all changing. And it's just kind of something that you take care of throughout the day. It's not your main focus of the day. For most people, they're not just thinking, how do I be as healthy as I can every minute of the day? It's just something that they're consistently trying to make improvements to. And that's how I would look at privacy. But,
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for a lot of people.
right. I actually don't really know how to answer or even handle the second question for Internet Ghost. Unless you had something
um
to add.
yeah, the second question is, how would you describe the threat model for the average person living in the developed world? um and this is another, I think this is a big misconception that I see a lot in the privacy community as well, that like a threat model is a specific thing. Like it's a tangible, this is the plan like that people follow. When threat modeling, the action is more about like self-evaluation. And it's like you have to look at what you're doing right now. You have to look at what you want to change, and you have to figure out the best way to accomplish that. And there's just it's so different for so many people that it's not like threat modeling is a scale where you can have like a low threat model or a high threat model. it's it's more of like a roadmap for you to continue your privacy journey. And it's like what I was saying earlier, every single person is going to make different decisions on that journey to get to where they want to be. And it's so different for everybody. Like, I guess the main thing I would want to get across with threat modeling is that it's it's not like it's not like a risk level. It's not like this is how threatened I feel. It's more of a tool that you use to evaluate different services and things like that.
It's language and an environment to help people,
Mm-hmm.
like a tool, like you said. And even if it was, let's assume that a threat model was a thing. You could assign a score to it out of 10. I have a
Right.
threat model of 3 type of deal. Even if that was the case, we can't answer your question because everyone is going to have a different tangible threat model if we're assuming that's a real thing. It's just everyone has
Right.
different priorities, everyone has different things they care about, everything has different things they want to protect. And then there's the next question of, are they actually protecting those things? Is there a mismatch? Most of the people, and this is why what I really care about and watch for, is there a mismatch between the things that you want to protect and what you're actually protecting? So what this looks like is, do you care about your family and protecting the safety of your family, but all of you guys are chatting on Facebook Messenger? That
Mm-hmm.
to me is a mismatch. That is, oh, this, you value the privacy and the safety of your family, and yet you're doing something that actively goes against that. So it's more for me of like reflecting on your values, what you want to protect, and then trying to make sure that your lifestyle is actually in alignment with that.
You know what I think this is? I think this is maybe just a disconnect in how these terms are used. I think a lot of people think of threat models as a list of threats and not as a way to deal with certain threats,
A
right?
model, like,
Right. But I think maybe what Internet Ghost is really getting at here is more of a question like, what do you think the biggest threats are to people living in the developed world? And that might be more tangible, maybe. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but like, if you just want to know what risks people face, there are some pretty obvious ones. Like in the privacy space, a lot of people are concerned with big tech advertising, for example. That could be a risk that a lot of people in the developed world face on a regular basis. There's also like security risks, like phishing attacks, stuff like that. So there are, I don't know if you, it's not really describing a threat model because we're not like telling you how to deal with these risks. That's more of an involved topic, but like coming up with risks that the average person might face. I don't know if you have any
I,
thoughts that come to mind there.
right, I think the most interesting thing that is a real risk that has data to back it up that shows it impacts millions of people each year, that if you ask any one of your friends or family, they've either experienced it themselves or know someone who's experienced it. So this is a real legitimate issue that everyone is aware of being a problem, and yet they don't really care about doing anything about it. And it's identity theft.
Hmm.
Identity theft is a real problem that impacts real people, and it doesn't just impact them by, oh, my email's online now. No, like, you'll have your entire identity stolen, and someone will open a line of credit under your name, or they're going to rip you off in some other way. It's going to take weeks, if not months, for you to fully remediate this process. And for some people, it takes years. For some people, they literally spend years of their lives dealing with having to fix a really bad identity theft crisis. And so that's personally what I really lean into when I talk to people. Everything you do, every shred of information ties back to your identity, and identity theft is a very real thing. And then you can tie that to really a lot of other issues. I think that is probably the biggest threat that people should be thinking about because it impacts the individual. Whether or not it's the biggest thing we should be concerned about socially is a different discussion. But because I also think that like big tech surveillance and the advertising industry, like you were saying, is also a massive issue. I think those things are probably not, those things are probably the reason why we can't even have real discussions about identity theft. because those things are so distracting and they're preventing us from having real discussions about really serious topics in the world. So I think that's actually in some
Yep.
ways a bigger issue. But when it comes to talking to an individual, an average person, and something that they're going to care about, everyone wants to protect their identity, I think. And I think
Yeah.
that's also why it's one of the few commercially successful privacy and security offerings that we've seen with this influx of identity monitoring services, right? Like that is
Hmm.
like the thing that's taking off and you don't need it. It's like the biggest scam. Like I guess it's not a scam because there is some use case to it, but you just don't need it. You freeze your credit, you take good care of your identity and you don't need things like that. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know. That's all I have to add.
that's a good one. I'll say promote my own site here. I will just add that Privacy Guides has a page called Common Threats in the knowledge base that doesn't it covers some like specific threats, but it also covers like very broad categories of threats that you may want to consider. So like looking through that, if you're kind of wondering like what are the things I should be thinking about in the first place, might give you a good starting point when you're kind of evaluating what you think is a threat to yourself.
Right. I'll check that out. I haven't seen that page yet on my end. Oh no, you gotta readjust.
I had to, I had to plug in my laptop. All right, what are we at now? You got the next question?
Eco Geek. Oh yeah, it's mine. The first one, at one point in one video, you mentioned you mainly only use a browser, a password manager, and Signal. Is that still mostly the case? And if so, can you explain more how you do that, what you use, what your approach is? So yeah, that's generally. Oop, oh my God. Oh, there's so many more questions. Big cry. I think after this one, we might be a little pickier. When did we start? We started at 12:45, so it's been an hour and a
Yeah, people have
half.
been adding some.
How long has it been? Oh, it's been an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. I would like to end this in an hour and a half, if possible. So in like 15, 20
Okay,
minutes. So let's speed up questions, see how many we can get through. All right.
sure.
So with EcoGeek, just to quickly get back to this, that's mostly my mobile configuration. So that's specifically what I was referring to when I said, yeah, my phone is pretty much completely used for Signal, a browser, and a password manager. That's pretty much it. Lately, I did, so as of the last month or so, and I was talking with Jonah about this, I did move over to moving some more things over to the mobile device because I found that some things like email were actually distracting me on desktop. And so I actually did move things over, like email to my phone, turned off all notifications. And so now I just have a dedicated time, like 10 minutes a day, where I get back to emails. So that was an easier workflow to set up on my phone. And I also prefer the security aspect of having email on my phone rather than the desktop where I do some other sensitive thing. There's also privacy and security considerations for that as well. But yeah, I would say my phone comes down to like 2FA, password manager, Signal, browser, and then things like my email client at this point. It's very bare bones. You say you're going sick of tired of tech and computers with the privacy implications or complexity, blah, 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 being a problem, and you're just trying to minimize things. I would say to minimize, I'm going to keep this very brief on my end, look at limiting devices first. If you have like 8 different tech devices, see how you can like start limiting those because it's really hard to manage multiple devices. I feel you have to like install software for all of them. You have to set up and configure it on all your devices. You have to keep all those devices and all the software up to date. So I personally limit devices first, and then from there I would just see like what you can restrict in terms of the accounts that you use. Can you combine any suites together, and just see what you can restrict on a per device basis. Do you have any tips on your end?
No, I think we can move on if you're done.
Okay.
Um, Diabolic on the forum asks about CakePay. Now that that has closed, are you optimistic about the future of anonymous digital payments?
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into it. So I really like CakePay, and they seem to be hinting that it's coming
Yeah,
back. It seems like they just got an unfortunate turn of
they
events with
yeah
their
they
provider.
they've said that they're working on it. I don't know like if they found a new provider yet or like what the specifics of that are. It is the whole situation kind of struck me as weird that it would even happen in the first place. I don't know why they didn't have like contracts in place to ensure that this service would last or anything like that. It's a weird thing to me.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe it did.
but do
Like,
you know about? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't
Do you
know.
know about any like alternatives to CakePay though that you can use right now?
Coin cards is one. Actually, I just listed them on the
Yeah.
Techlore site recently. CoinCards does support Monero, but it's all online. Like you can't get it on your phone and just conveniently um, check out. Actually, because of the CakePay thing, they sent me an email because I still had that Subway gift card that I purchased in the CakePay showcase that we did on Techlore, and I still had $16 left on the gift card. So I need to get
Hmm.
myself some lunch one of these days at Subway. But yeah, CoinCards is the only thing I can really suggest. Otherwise, there might be services. Yeah, CoinCards is the only one I can suggest. I don't know of any other service off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just hope CakePay ends up coming back sooner rather than later.
Me too. They seem to be confident they will, but I don't know. I haven't talked to any of the people I know over there about it yet. So,
Hmm.
all right. Um.
Pablo on the forum asks,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
oh
You
sorry,
already started.
what photo storage solution do you recommend to somebody who's been using Apple or Google Photos in the past and doesn't have the time or can't maintain a server themselves with features like facial recognition, sharing, that kind of thing? Do you have any thoughts?
um. The only thing I can reasonably suggest that I've used is Synology Photos, which has pretty much all of that, but it does
Yeah,
require you having to buy the NAS, and so like you are maintaining a server, but it is like the easiest possible thing that I can classify as maintaining a server. Otherwise, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Like Apple iCloud with end-to-end encryption. It's not the best thing in the world if you're really trying to avoid Apple, but that is something I would at least consider.
yeah, that is an option for people. I Yeah, I guess I would just say that like if you want to really control your data, you almost kind of have to self-host almost
Mm-hmm.
inherently.
Agreed.
And there are like plug and play turnkey solutions like Synology, like you said, that work really well without like having to have any server maintenance experience or like it's really running a server doesn't have to be difficult. There are products like Nextcloud or PhotoPrism that work well, but maybe require more expertise. But there are also self-hosted platforms that pretty much don't require any expertise to run. So,
Right. I and then like I don't know if Pablo, if you haven't seen my Synology review, I was in the same boat as you. I used to use Google Photos. I'm talking like a decade plus ago, like way back in the day. I used to love Google Photos, and I pretty much kept a local photo library ever since I deleted it. And I just never found anything that replaced it for me. And what replaced it for me was Synology Photos. Like it is so easy to use, so easy to maintain, so easy to set up, and the clients are fantastic. It even has face recognition, and you can share links with your contacts. It even has like a share album, which I've been using with my contacts. So like after I'll hang out with some people, if they have some photos that I want, I'll just share them a link, and I'll be like, "Hey, can you upload photos to this URL?" And then it just adds it to an album, and then I can share that album with anybody. So it's really nice. I can really strongly suggest Synology Photos. And speaking of, the next question is from Alula. Self-hosting has become pretty popular. If it were to become much more accessible, would it be something that you would recommend to people, or would our current cloud-based services still beat it out since it's managed by more round-the-clock professionals?
to me, I would have to say that it kind of depends on the app. There are a lot of things that you could self-host, like photos, for example. Synology Photos is actually super easy to do right now if you have their hardware. Um, and there isn't really like a big uptime requirement to something like that. Like if your Synology NAS is powered off for some reason for a couple hours, like you're probably gonna survive without access to Synology Photos. Whereas like some services, like a lot of federated services, for example, like if you're talking about self-hosting chat like Matrix or Mastodon, you really can't have any downtime or you miss messages or the network gets messed up and stuff like that. Um, and that stuff would be more difficult to recommend self-hosting for everybody. But for a lot of like basic stuff, like for photos, for file storage, stuff like that, like self-hosted options seem like a good idea and within like the realm of accessibility for a lot of people, in my opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on self-hosting beyond that.
Not really. All I'll say is, in terms of convenience and usability, I will say that a lot of the services that you're kind of suggesting uh, or alluding to are very nice, and they typically beat out self-hosted solutions. That was the big reason why I avoided self-hosting for a long time. And I do think that like the middle ground for me was Synology for the things that I covered in my review, which is photos, documents, Drive, kind of the basics. But I'm not really hosting any public facing services. Like Jonah's the one who's hosting like the forum that you're leaving this comment on right now. That's something that would need 24/7 round the clock maintenance and things like that. So that's where things might get more complicated. That's the stuff I don't touch. But in terms of just like end user stuff, yeah, I think there are some things that it would make more sense to self host that I could recommend to people.
Mm-hmm. Uh, uh, Next question on the forum, is about LavaBit, and whether it's still secure. I haven't looked too much into it myself since it came back. I remember looking into it when they first announced they were coming back, and they were working on a ton of cool looking open source like email stuff for like encrypting emails and stuff like that. And as far as I saw, a lot of that open source stuff never really went anywhere. It never really got released or published. Um, and I don't know if that's changed recently, but like I just haven't really seen the need to evaluate LavaBit. I don't know what their advantage is right now. Um, so yeah, to me, the reason I haven't been talking about it is because they promised a lot of stuff and then didn't deliver a lot of stuff from my perspective. So then I never really took another look at it. Maybe their hosted service is better now. I don't know. I don't know if you've looked into it at all.
I haven't looked into it. I have literally no comment. It's just not something I've looked at. I
Yeah.
haven't seen much demand for it. I haven't like heard from them at all. So there just hasn't been a good reason for me to look into them yet. I mean, there's hundreds of services out there for me to take a look at. So this just wasn't one of them. So I don't have
Yeah,
anything to add
it's
here.
just one of those things to me. It's like they're not really doing anything exceptional, and I see it brought up like maybe once a month, if that, on various privacy communities, and it's mostly like a brand recognition thing because Snowden used it
Exactly.
back when it originally came out. But like since then, Proton Mail, Tutanota, services like that have like progressed the level of email security like far beyond what LavaBit used to provide for sure. And I don't know if LavaBit now is comparable to those, but like you already have two great options. I don't know why. I'm not sure if there's a reason to explore a third one or not.
Right. And also, it might be a great service. I don't
Yeah.
know anything about it. I'm not really commenting too much on it because I haven't used it or looked into it. So,
Mm-hmm.
next question. Do you recommend using tools like privacy.sexy or W10 shut up? While it's good for privacy, people who don't fully understand what they're doing can seriously harm the security of their system. So these tools, for people who don't know, are kind of like debloating tools, kind of like you just install them and they try to disable certain things in Windows to make it a little bit more privacy respecting. Oop. Um, I don't know. On my end, sure, if you see value in using these tools, I say go for it. I would just say like be aware that some things might break on your system. You're not going to fix all the privacy issues. You might open up some other issues. Like a lot of them disable really important security features, like you allude to, and they even disable Windows
Yeah.
10 and things like that, or no, Windows Defender, and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So there are some things that you should watch out for. I would say if privacy is your concern, there's not much you can do on Windows. You can definitely make it better. I would say like the port master is a great thing that you can use on Windows. Maybe there's some things you can disable, and there are a lot of things that are covered in like the Techlore Windows guide. But yeah, just be aware of the limitations in those tools. I don't formally suggest them in the Techlore resources because I feel like it's something that requires a more nuanced discussion.
Yeah. I haven't looked into either of these specific tools, but they don't they've never really made a lot of sense to me because I don't fully understand why you would continue using Windows if you're this concerned about privacy in this case. But
Right. Well, I guess, like some people are still forced into using Windows and they want to feel like they're even moving the needle a little bit without the ability to move to something else. So I can see why someone would want to do that, but it comes with a lot of sacrifices, I feel.
yeah, I guess what I would have to say is if you do have to use Windows for whatever reason, there are so many things that you can do like outside of Windows that are going to improve your privacy. All of the applications that you run, like for example, like choosing a different browser even than Microsoft Edge is going to make a huge impact to your privacy already. And where you don't need to do like system level modifications for. Like your operating system, it is important, but it's not like the biggest risk to your privacy compared to like all of the applications and services that you use on top of that, which are probably not privacy respecting unless you choose private options.
Actually, no, I want you to like dive into that more because this is a common thing. You know, when we went to Monerotopia together, we
Mm-hmm.
listened to a whole discussion that someone was having about how using I don't know if this is a direct quote, but I think this is almost a direct quote. If you use
Okay.
Monero on a proprietary system, you're instantly compromised.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much saying that the entire selling point of Monero, everything that Monero does, just doesn't matter if you do it on Windows, was pretty much the takeaway. And actually, I really want you to talk about this because it's something I see a ton, which is a lot of people think, well, I'm on Windows anyway, so it doesn't matter if I use a password manager. Or I'm on Windows anyway, so why does it matter if I move over to Signal? And so, do you mind speaking to that? Because I think a lot of people just assume that if you're on a privacy invasive operating system, it doesn't matter what happens on top of it or above it.
Yeah. Um, and it really depends on your perspective. I can see an argument for the idea that like your operating system is kind of the base of everything, and you have to secure it. But I also don't think, like realistically, the threat of your operating system being compromised is like orders of magnitude lower than the threat of like the service that you're using being compromised or the browser that you're using being compromised or like the risk of your privacy being compromised if you don't use a service like a password manager and things like that. Like in terms of just the risk that is presented to you, um, your operating system privacy makes up a small part of that, and it's probably one of the last things that I would be worried about securing beyond like the defaults rather than um, the very first thing that you do in most cases. Just because, like, for I mean, you just have to realize that most people are using um, stuff like Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, or they're using non-private payment methods instead of Monero, and switching to something like Brave, switching to something like Monero. That's gonna be a much bigger impact, I feel, than like continuing to use um, unencrypted an unencrypted email provider and like a non-private payment service while using like Linux or something. Like fixing the operating system doesn't fix all of the other things that you're using, basically.
Right. Definitely a balancing act. I think obviously it's
Yeah.
really nice to be on a privacy friendly operating system where it just respects your privacy
Mm-hmm.
out of the box. But just because the operating system collects telemetry about, like, let's say Windows can report back to Microsoft literally every program you use, how often you use it, and like let's say it knows you're using Signal. That doesn't discount the fact that you're getting top end-to-end encryption with all your contacts. You know,
Right.
that still protects the message. It still protects your other contacts, so it's still a non-selfish thing too. Not everything's about us. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
like what we recommend that people do actually keeps the people around them safer as well. And so there are still benefits. Like think about it that way. Like this is actually a big side tangent. Like I agree with everything you said, but the side tangent here is like a lot of you people listening probably have tried to convince all of your contacts to move over to your favorite end-to-end encrypted messenger of your choice. Session, Signal, Threema, doesn't matter. And I bet none of the people you try to convince to move over to them are using Linux. Does that mean they shouldn't use it? Like
Mm-hmm.
you need to get out of like I will confidently say this and I will be very firm about this. Like if you are going to like gatekeep the whole like just don't I'm not going to use this privacy service on this operating system, then you can't have that expectation for other people either who you want to be using your software for your own needs. Then like at that point you need to get your head out of your ass. You know, like it's more important than just you. Things like end-to-end encrypted messaging, end-to-end encrypted emails, things of that nature, it keeps everyone safe, not just an individual. And if other people are using them on Windows, it's still a net gain to everyone else. So even from like a
That is
societal.
exactly why that quote from the Monero conference, that's why it is so funny to me, I think, because if you're literally at a conference where they're promoting privacy protecting cryptocurrency, like, why would you want to go out of your way to discourage everyone who is using Monero just because they're also using Windows, right? Like,
Right.
from that perspective, you should be glad that they are trying to use Monero before you try to say that they're instantly compromised because they're using some other service with it, right?
Right. It's just
It's
not that
weird.
effective, I feel. It's just going to send people away from privacy solutions. And on top of
Right.
that, like I want to see the evidence. There is so much evidence and so much research that's been done on all the ways that you're tracked online, and it's real.
Mm-hmm.
There is, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't something that demonstrates, oh yeah, Microsoft can just like log into their system and like just completely take over your operating system, steal your private keys inside your own little private like Monero client, and then they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
send that to advertisers. You better back up that claim. Like that's a serious claim. Like you're pretty much making that large of a claim. And look, I'm the last person to say Windows is a privacy respecting. I'm getting furious. No, I'm the last person to say that like Windows is a privacy respecting operating system. It has tons of privacy issues, but there's a big difference between Windows collecting telemetry and having all this invasive stuff that goes on, and them straight up stealing data from your operating system and sending it to some boogeyman, whoever it is. I don't know. Is it the CEO? Is it like the security team? Like I don't know, but there's some boogeyman that's just straight up stealing like your actual like Monero keys. Like it's a whole different ball game. So I don't know. I'm
Absolutely.
so
That is
upset that
this is one
I
of the
lost my
biggest
train
things
of
for
thought.
me.
What?
Like that is one of the biggest things for me, and it's kind of frustrating having this discussion with people. But I really think that people need to focus on like real actual threats before theoretical threats.
Exactly.
Like dealing with all of these theoretical issues with Windows, for example, is good. It's something you should do, but it's not something that you need to prioritize first, just because the risk seems the biggest. Because it's your operating system. It seems like if that was compromised, that would be really bad. But there are so many other actual risks that have been proven to exist and make a big impact. Maybe they're not as big as an OS compromise, but they're more likely than an OS compromise, right? So focus on those, and then only when you've secured yourself against all of that can you like work on securing against theoretical security threats. But like the the most recent example that comes to mind is that story about um what is it called? I don't remember. When you like plug in your phone to like a USB port at the airport, for example, and like people were always saying for years and years um, that they could steal all of your data if you did that. When in reality, like the risk of that happening is non-existent. That's literally never been proven to have happened in at any point in history, and there are protections against that kind of thing. But like even as recently as last year, you'll see like government agencies and security experts like say that you need to avoid that kind of thing, um, when it actually doesn't make a difference. And there are so many things that you could be doing that do actually make a difference, and that's the main thing. I don't want theoretical risks to distract you from the risks that are out there in the wild that you need to protect against, right?
1,000%. I mean, I have two things to add here. One, this is by far, I think so with my individual coaching that I have with people one on one, right? Like the individual consulting coaching. This is like the number one thing that I deal with. It's like people come in, they're like, I want to do this. And I go, okay, do you have a password manager? Oh, no. And it's like, then how come you're trying to like have like they'll present me what they want to do, which is super extreme, and I ask why, and I listen to their why, and I go, okay, first, I don't, and I'll explain why. Like maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. It doesn't matter. But also, then when you start like really diving into things, you'll realize that like the basics are just not even done, and they're
Mm-hmm.
super exposed, and they have a lot of these issues that they never even considered because they just want to go for that extreme hypothetical threat instead of the real threat. And so I totally agree. It's the number one thing I see when I'm doing coaching and consulting. It's individuals who are looking at hypothetical threats instead of real threats. The other thing I'll say is this is not specific to privacy. I think this is just like an internet problem. I think that all across the internet, regardless of the field, everyone shouts things. Everything is loud,
Hmm.
and so everything seems important, and it's hard for someone who's not educated and doesn't have like a nuanced approach to things to be able to sort through what's important and what's not important. And like even on like if you look at YouTube and privacy alone, you're going to see like people who are going to make videos like delete signal because of this like very particular issue that like won't even impact most people. And that's
Hmm.
going to be just as loud as someone saying delete Facebook because Facebook has a mountain of issues which impact everybody and society and democracies, but they're going to be just as loud when it's a YouTube video. So I don't think it's just a privacy issue. I think it's an internet issue. This is also seen in a lot of other places as well, like in the health world. It seems like, exercising and eating well is to the same loudness as taking an ice bath. Like everyone just thinks ice baths are just going to make them healthy. And I'm like, interesting. It seems like people care more about the ice baths than just eating a proper whole foods diet. Like it's crazy to me. So I think it's actually a pretty universal issue if I were to say.
Yeah.
I actually quickly went through the rest of the forum comments, and there wasn't anything there I really wanted to answer. And that way we can still like quickly just go through the live stream comments so we don't totally ignore all you live stream people, if that's okay. Did you see anything in the forum that looked interesting?
Okay. I haven't looked through the rest, but if you say so, I'm
Okay.
fine with moving on. We can
Okay.
maybe cover them next time.
Okay. I'm going through the YouTube comments right now. If you see anything, just let me know. I'm looking through it too.
Okay.
When registering a new account somewhere, how do you copy and paste the new randomly generated password if website blocks pasting passwords? Oh, that's such a pet peeve of mine. I freaking hate services that do this. Every time it happens, I normally reach out to their customer support and I leave a pretty nasty email. That's like the one time I'm a Karen, I think. I'm like, you guys are being absolutely insane right now. But no, I just type it manually. My password manager gives me a nice like full blown view of like the password, and it's very easy to read off and just type it in. But it's insane.
Yeah, I do that. I would say that, like, for most services, I have a completely randomized password, but for services that I do have to type it in, I'll use that Diceware password generator to
Ah,
make like an easier to
that's
type one,
smart. That's
just
smart.
for that.
I don't do that. I should use the passphrases then for those.
Yeah.
That makes more sense
Hmm.
instead of like just going all around the keyboard.
Because especially if you can't like paste it on login either, it's super annoying.
Here's a question I'll ask you.
Hmm.
You're probably more familiar with this than I am. Sonic77 asks, oh my God, I don't know. Okay, YouTube is very unhappy with me right now. Uh, I'm not clicking. Oh, there we go. Okay, I was released from YouTube's grasp. Okay. Sorry if it's been asked before, but is it safe privacy-wise to upgrade to Windows 11 in your opinion, or should one still try to stick to Windows 10 for now? Much love for Germany.
Um, I have not. I don't. I'm not aware of any like benefits to switching to Windows 11 off the top of my head, and I haven't really looked into it too much. But because Windows 10 is still actively supported and it's more understood by people already, there's a lot more resources about like hardening Windows 10, for example. It probably makes most sense to stick with Windows 10 as long as it's being supported until other people catch up, I would say. I guess I don't really have any specific advice. I haven't looked too much into Windows 11, but
I've actually kind of seen other information, mainly due to on surveillance report. I think there's, and again, these are all sadly like I don't have the stories in front of me to like reference at the moment, but there have been a couple stories where there were some security issues on Windows 10 that were already fixed in Windows 11, and it was actually more of
interesting.
like implementation issues, so things that like Windows 10 might not be able to cover. But again, these were like isolated things studied by researchers. I don't even remember what they were. So this is something that I would need to follow up on and probably send some stuff your way. But there might be, just to summarize and just stay like accurate for for this live stream. There might be some things in Windows 11 that might give you an advantage on the security front, depending on certain situations and depending on those what those are. I just don't know what they are, so I
Yeah.
can't even really comment on it right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. I just yeah, it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah. You're right now, as long as there's security updates for both of them, you're probably fine on both. Just that I would follow up on those individual security risks that are found on Windows 10. Supposedly. Again, this is based on my memory. I would
Hmm.
not take that too seriously. I would look into it more.
Yeah. Um, I saw a question. Tech Nick asked this question earlier, but just asked it again right now. They were thinking about getting the Proton Pass deal for $1 a month, and they were wondering if you think it makes sense just for the aliasing feature.
Dude, to this day, I just don't even want to bother to understand the whole Proton Pass simple login situation.
Hmm.
So it seems like a good deal. So, but I think you're a better person to talk about this because you seem to actually understand it.
I think it is a good deal. I mean, Simple Login Premium is $30 a month, and right now Proton Pass is 12 just for a few more days. I mean, $12 a year and $30 a year, not $30 a month, um, just until the end of this month. Um, but I guess you'd have to look at Simple Login Premium's features and see if any of them, besides the unlimited aliasing, make sense for you. If you don't care about any of Simple Login Premium's features besides unlimited aliases, then Proton Pass seems like a good deal and it makes sense to use it. But the other way around might make more sense for people eventually. Right now, if you buy Simple Login Premium for $30 a year, it comes with Proton Pass Unlimited, and then you also get the other Simple Login Premium features like PGP encryption and things like that, that you wouldn't if you just had the $12 Proton Pass subscription. So I guess if you just want unlimited aliases, then it's a good deal if you can get it now. But when Proton Pass becomes, I don't know what its full price is, like $5 a month or something, which is $60 a year, or maybe it's $4 a month if you pay annually. I don't remember off the top of my head, but um, in that case, simple login probably still makes sense. I mean, I don't think that simple login is like a bad deal in the first place. So if you can save a bit, that's good.
That makes more sense because
I don't
that
know if you have
was
anything to add.
no, because the main thing I was really confused about. Well, there's two things I'm still confused about because I understand simple login and I understand Proton
Yeah,
Pass.
yeah.
I use both of them. I didn't understand the subscription and how the subscription differed between the two of them. And the second thing is I don't understand how they speak to each other yet
Uh huh.
because as far as I know, is this maybe I'm right about that. I'm gonna ask here. My simple login aliases do not appear in Proton Pass, but my Proton Pass
Correct.
aliases appear in simple login.
Correct.
Okay, so I got one of them
I
down.
don't know. I don't know why they've done it like this, and they did this for the subscriptions too, because Proton Pass doesn't come with Simple Login Premium, but Simple Login Premium comes with Proton Pass Plus.
I wonder
I don't know
why.
why. I don't know why they wouldn't do it, and I kind of get why, because right now Proton Pass is cheaper, and so $12 a year for Simple Login Premium would be a great deal. But after this month, Proton Pass is going to be more expensive, and I don't understand why it wouldn't just come with Simple Login Premium. But they've confirmed to me that it doesn't, and you can test it right now, and it doesn't seem like they're going to change that. So it's a really weird decision on there that I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't get it either. But that was where I was really confused about was the subscription and how like the accounts intermingled. It's especially weird
Yeah.
on. I mean, on mine, I don't have to care on my end because I just have a Proton Business subscription and I can just log into Simple Login with my Proton account and I can just download Proton Pass and I get that for free as part of my business subscription. So
Yeah.
like for me, it's the same either way. But now I just don't even know which one to use. I just use Proton Pass now because I like the extension better. But now I'm like, does it make more sense for me to use Simple Login or Proton Pass? Because I have access to both of them. It's it's interesting.
That I don't know.
But
I'm sticking with Simple Login personally. I'll say that. But
I'm sticking with Proton Pass because Proton Pass shows up in Simple Login.
yeah,
But the inverse isn't true.
I guess if I thought I would switch to Proton Pass, I would use it, but the Proton Pass extension does not work well with my password manager's extension, and I don't really plan on switching password managers to Proton Pass
Got it.
anytime soon, so um, it just works better to keep it separate.
Got it. Thanks for the heads up, Wanko. I did see your comment earlier, and I changed levels a little bit, so hopefully that made things better. I wonder what percentage of Android using. Oh, here's a question. I like this. I'm gonna end on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we're already past. We're at an hour. Yeah, we're 20 minutes past. So I'm gonna end on this one. Unless there's something else you see. But I'm gonna end on Timon's question. Where do you see Techlore headed in the next 2 years? I'm gonna answer that unless there's something else that you see.
We've been doing a lot of talking about that lately, so
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah. So I'm looking to go more. I'm still trying to find the language for this. So I'm like still processing how to articulate the vision. But I'm looking to go more in a like personal direction with things. So I really want to talk more about my privacy journey, my security journey on the Techlore channel, and give more of personal insight, personal opinions, personal looks. So rather than it being more of a like, here's what the community commonly suggests that you do to make your browser more private and secure. So more professional, more scripted. I want to make things a little bit more personal. And I think many of you may have already noticed this direction the last couple months as I start to make more content that's like, here's my browser journey, here's what happened. And it really reflects a lot of different things that I'm doing as well. It's reflecting how things are produced behind the scenes, how things are scripted, what videos I even make in the first place. I'm just looking to add more of my personal value into this because I feel like there's already so much. Like back when I started YouTube, in like 2014, there was no privacy and security content, none at all, pretty much on YouTube, which is why I started making content. And back then, there was a lot of value to just tell people like, oh hey, here's like some good privacy browsers, here's some good security browsers, blah blah blah. And now I think that's less valuable. I still want to do it and I'm still going to do it, but I want to maybe move away because previously I'd say it was like 80% informational, 20% personal. I want to make this more 50-50, I would say is probably the best way to articulate this. So that way, like on Tecla, you're going to see a lot more Henry, just personal. Here's my thoughts, here's my opinions, and also here's like the more formal stuff that you guys need. So guides, tutorials, recaps, and things like that. So hopefully a lot more reviews as well, where I can just talk about things. But no one likes our reviews because they're too critical.
I think it's good to be critical, to be honest.
I think
this
so
is
too.
the only way that these products are going to improve, and they just have to deal with the negative.
Right.
It's not even really. It's usually constructive criticism, which is the point, right?
It's not like I just go in a review and I'm like, I hate them because their logo's orange. It's like, no, it's like, hey, like, no, like this kind of sucked. Like this other service I used had this feature and you guys don't have this feature and I consider this feature a staple and I'm upset. Is that really that bad? That's not wrong. That's like, I'm allowed to like criticize things. And I also, you know what? And I get it. Like if I'm going to throw stones, I should expect to receive stones thrown back at me. So I get it. But also people have a weird expectation for what a review is. A review is a review.
I don't know. You brought this up twice now, and I was just kind of thinking that I don't know how to say it. I think it's difficult to differentiate between like actual feedback on your videos versus like just people being blind fans of whatever service you're viewing, or even like possibly in some cases associated with the service themselves. Not that happens for a lot of these reviews, but like it's possible on the internet where like people try to create this false engagement on reviews, and it makes reviews like just in general more difficult, right, across the internet as a whole.
It's so hard.
And I think that like most people get more value from reviews that are critical than reviews that just say, yep, everything is great, right? So I definitely it seems like the right direction to go, obviously, is to just cover it as comprehensively as possible. I don't know why. I don't think it to me, pushback against that kind of thing doesn't seem super legitimate. So it's hard for me to take it seriously when I see stuff like that, you know? I
Me
don't
too.
know if that's your impression of it, but
It's
that's how I see
similar.
it.
I don't know what the advantage is for us, like the privacy community that's already like non-existent in the world statistically. You know, like we're like, you know, like point a fraction of a percentage of the total population of the world is in the privacy world. Like, why does it
Hmm.
matter if all of us are trying to like just pretend like there aren't problems with services that we use? Because if our goal is to get like 99 plus percent of people in the world to use these services, they're going to be having like standards for things. And so like if we
Right.
can actually make the services that good, then people are going to be more likely to use those services. And I have an obligation, like I have like this channel and I have an obligation to be honest and truthful. Like that is like a reputation. That is what I'm going to do. The moment I start like being like, well, if I'm not gonna do I don't want to be too harsh on them because then people new to the privacy world are gonna be like they're not gonna use the service. No, like it's just an honest review. I'm gonna be honest about what privacy is, what it isn't, what security is, what security isn't. And if people want bullshit, they can go to a different channel. That's just not
Yeah.
what's going to be here. And shoot, what did you say? There was something else you said that I wanted to talk about. Oh, I constantly feel gaslit. And that's like literally the life of a creator if you even bother to look at criticism. Like I'm constantly gaslit because like there's always a little bit of truth I think to every criticism. Like if someone is like, "Oh, like your reviews are way dude, in the same review, in the Proton Pass review, literally the same freaking review. You were too nice. You were too harsh." Comments. So
Hmm.
like think about that. If like it's impossible to be a creator and read those comments and not even give it like a shred or a cell, like a brain cell of attention to see how truthful it is. It's not possible. Like there is always going to be a small part of you that at least reflects on it for like a split second before you just write it off and be like it's just an annoying person on the internet. But like even for that split second, like you're constantly gaslighting yourself. Like no matter what you say or what you publish, there's always going to be two people who interpret it the same way. And really, what actually is really nice for me, and actually, I think the only thing I really look for with feedback is I look at the like dislike ratio. That's like by far the best way to know if something I did was good. And it almost always is because our like dislike ratio is almost always above 98% for all of our videos. So, like,
Hmm.
that's what matters because most people who have annoying things to say are going to leave comments and be annoying. Other people are just going to leave a like or a dislike and move on with their day because that's what I do. If I watch a crap
Yeah.
video, I'm not going to waste time leaving a comment on the video. Like, who do you think I am? I'm just going to leave a dislike and move on and find a better video. So like these people have like no lives if they like are just like going into comments just to complain about nothing or something,
Hmm.
which is nothing. um and then what I do is we do have videos that don't do well. So for example, like the why I moved to stock Android video doesn't have a good like dislike ratio. So when something doesn't have a good like dislike ratio, I look to see why. And if the reasoning is something valid, which in this case I don't think it is, I think that that video got a bad like dislike ratio just because, and when I say bad, I mean it's like 80-20%, which is still not bad. But like the reason why 20% of people disliked it is because they didn't understand the video. And that's not my
Right.
problem. Versus if I
Well,
am
it sort
Linus.
of is, isn't it? Like, I mean, if your job is to convey this information to people
I mean, it is. So there, you're right. Like there
from
is
that
to
perspective.
some extent, but I feel like I'll rewatch the video, I'll go through the talking points, and there's nothing I can change. Like I left it out there, I said what I needed to say, and maybe there's always something you can do better. But for people who went in good faith and trying to understand information, they would have walked out, I think, with the information they wanted. And if they wanted to like not understand the information and they wanted to hate, they were gonna hate anyway. There's You can only be so good, I feel. Like you can give someone perfection and they'll still ignore it if they don't want to listen to it. Is the way I
Yeah,
look at it.
it is. It's really difficult to make a video. Like, it's hard to improve a video when you don't understand why the other person doesn't understand your point, I think.
I agree.
Like, it's just confusing.
Right. And this is why I tell you, if I had it my way, no YouTube comments. In fact, like we already did this on YouTube because on Odyssey, I'm so tired. On
Yeah.
Odyssey, no comments. PeerTube, I already opened an issue on PeerTube at some point. Like they have their forum. I was like globally disable comments per channel. Like as a content creator, I should have the ability to turn off comments on PeerTube so that no comments appear on videos. And I would do the same thing on YouTube. But the problem with YouTube, and the main reason why I don't disable comments on YouTube, is because there would otherwise be no way for a new person to our channel to have any kind of feedback to know that it's like legitimate. Because back in the day, people can look at a like-dislike ratio. If a guide with no, if like a Next DNS tutorial with no comments had a super good like-dislike ratio, you can just write it off and be like, oh, this creator doesn't like comments, but they have a good like-dislike ratio. It's a good video. I'm going to spend time on this video. But now that likes and dislikes, the dislikes are hidden, and if we removed comments, there would be no instant feedback for people to be able to see that it's a legitimate video. And like we've talked about engagement too, and how like most likely comments are good for engagement, which YouTube likes, which makes us perform better. But I'd say for me, the main thing is just like I want like someone new to the channel to feel comfortable, and I think the comments are a good way to do that. But if it weren't for that, I would much rather just shut off all the instant comments and just ask people to email feedback if they had feedback, because that's where you're going to get real feedback, is like someone who takes the time to send an email to someone. You're probably still going to get some annoying stuff, but like if someone actually articulates their complaints in an email, like that's actually like something I can work off of. And we do get those, by the way. Like we get really valuable emails from individuals who are like, hey, you covered this. I want to let you know I have this accessibility issue. I can't see things, and I want you to make you aware of this one problem I have so you can make this change in your content, because I want to see your content get better. It's very different than LOL, you're stupid. On YouTube, and I'm like, well, why am I stupid? Like, let me know. I want to know. I can make it better. If you want me to be less stupid, I'll do it for you. I'll do anything you want, please. That's exactly how I deal with YouTube comments. I'm just gonna beg down to all of your every win. Not, but all right. I'm done. That's a big tangent.
You're done.
Yeah.
All right.
Should I start? Let me just check the comments, make sure.
I think that's it then.
Yeah.
It? I mean, there were some other questions that we didn't cover, but can't get them all, right? We'll do this again.
Right. Yeah, next month. So next month, if you want to be part of the Q&A, if you didn't get your question answered, it will almost certainly be answered if you ask on our Patreon. Patreon.com/Techlore. I also want to greatly thank all of our patrons, because you guys allow us to do all this stuff completely for free. Like we're live streaming and like answering your questions live to the public because we can, and we have the ability to do that. Also, our patrons allow us to pretty much turn down all the crap that we receive every day, and so that we can actually dedicate our time and resources to things that matter. And so I really can't thank our patrons enough for allowing us to do this. It's super awesome, and you can be one of them. Just $5 a month is all you need to join. That's like a cup of coffee. Most people probably drink coffee like every day now. So like for a cup of coffee a month, you can support us, help us spread privacy and security to the masses. We even contribute to other projects like the EFF too and stuff like that. So we use some of the money for other projects as well. So yeah, like join our Patreon. If you don't like Patreon, we also do LibrePay, we do Monero. We have a million other support methods on techlore.tech/support. And anyone else? I want to thank you for your time, Jonah. It's always fun to do these.
Yeah.
Thank everyone who asked a question, gave us content, gave us things to talk about, and also everyone who tuned in live. You guys are all awesome, and anyone who's going to tune in after the fact, you guys are all awesome as well for going back and watching all these things. Is there anything else you wanted to add or say?
I think that's it.
All right. Yeah, we got some exciting stuff going on back here. Jonah and I are talking a lot about Go Incognito 2, which is exciting. And there's some exciting stuff that we're looking at. That's all I'm
super excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. So I'm super hyped. And we'll see you all next month. And ciao. Is that it?
Yep.
All right. See everyone next month.